Welcome to Rising Tide Startups, where today's most exciting solopreneurs share their startup stories. They also deliver tangible strategies that they would implement personally if starting their business over today. Each episode is a startup masterclass. Make sure you take notes. Take it away, Kevin.
This is Kevin Pruitt with Rising Tide Startups, and my guest today is Sarah Gallo. Sarah, thanks for joining us on Rising Tide.
Hi, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. I mean, you and I tried to connect probably months ago on Facebook, and COVID hit, and it's just kind of hard to catch up with a traveler. I mean, you guys are so busy that it's really hard to really nail something down when we know where you're going to be and when. But
yeah, I mean, I guess that's a benefit of a pandemic right now is that
exactly.
we're kind of in one place now.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Well, I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself and then fill in the gaps. And I did watch a podcast, the interview you had done earlier, and I can maybe add some more details at the end, but just give us a brief summary of who Sarah Gallo is.
Perfect. So I'm also known as the 5 Foot Traveler. Up until this year, I have been traveling full time for the last 7 years. I've been to 114 countries across all 7 continents, which I know is pretty crazy, especially when you add in the fact that I used to have a 10-year debilitating fear of flying. I have worked with clients all around the world, consulting in their social media and their business and marketing strategy, and doing photography for tourism boards and things like that. So it's been a lot of fun. It's gotten me to some really incredible places around the world that a lot of people don't have the opportunity to visit. And so one of my goals has been to try to bring the destination to you through your screens.
Now, I did actually look through some Instagram, your Instagram account before we got online here, and you got some incredible images there from different places that you've been in the world. And so
Thank you.
not only I think are you good at the whole idea of just traveling and writing about it, but your photography skills are great. I mean,
Thank
just
you.
the way you frame some of those photos and just kind of set the stage for the images. So we'll make sure those are in the show notes too, your Instagram account to go look at. But so walk us through kind of, I think you went to New York University, NYU. So you finished there, and then there's something about a scholarship that you kind of applied for.
Yeah, so I went to NYU. I studied abroad twice, actually. So I studied abroad in Florence, Italy in 2011. And after 3 weeks of studying there, I was like, oh my gosh, my life's forever changed. I have to incorporate travel somehow. And I had no idea how I was actually going to do that, especially because at the time I was still getting over my fear of flying, or I had technically just gotten over my fear of flying. And I decided that ultimately the best way to incorporate travel would be to study abroad again. What better way to be able to introduce, learn a new language, introduce yourself to a new culture, new customs, things like that, discover new destinations. And so I decided to study abroad a second time and graduate early from NYU. So I studied in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And leading up to Buenos Aires, I was on a train home back to Connecticut. And I was just like mindlessly scrolling through some scholarships online. NYU is notorious for not giving out scholarships. And I saw this scholarship to keep a travel blog, and I was like, well, that's pretty cool. I mean, that'd be pretty awesome. And I was like, all right, well, no harm done if I apply for it. Worst case scenario, I don't get it. I've got 45 minutes to waste on this train anyway. And so I applied for the scholarship, and lo and behold, I got the scholarship. And that was actually, I guess, technically my first paid gig as a full-time traveler. I was paid to write about my experiences traveling throughout South America, and it was distributed through NYU and obviously to my family and friends. And it really forced me to actually document my experiences versus just like throwing up a picture and putting 2 words there and hoping for the best, which is what I did the first time around. So it really forced me to have those memories permanently online, which is actually amazing because I find that I go back to those posts all the time, and I am reminded of experiences that at this point I've completely forgotten about because I've done so much in the last 7, 8 years. And so it's this incredible memento that I have. But what I didn't know at the time is that that would go on to become like my full-time job. You know, I was on that straight path to become this like big hotshot PR lady in New York City. I always thought that that's what I wanted. And that's what I worked really hard for, you know, through high school to get into NYU and through NYU. And then at the end of studying in Buenos Aires, I walked out of my last exam ever. I went to the Bolivian salt flats, trekked through Patagonia, spent Christmas in Antarctica and New Year's Eve in Rio, which is just insane. I mean, I put my body through so much in that week. It went from like, sub-zero temperatures to 114 degrees Celsius, 114 degrees Fahrenheit or 46 degrees Celsius. It was nuts. And then, you know, I was expected to go home and get that PR job. So after this wild, life-changing experience in South America, I went back to New York City. I got an apartment. I started applying for those PR jobs. And I still thought that that was the path that I was going down. And every single PR job that I applied to, I got accepted to every single one. But then I realized that what they were willing to pay me with a very good degree, you know, I graduated top of my class from an excellent school, wasn't enough to live in New York City, much less live even remotely comfortably.
Right.
And at first I was like, all right, you know, I guess that this is what adulthood's like. You know, you make pennies and you climb your way up the corporate ladder and somehow you just
gotta put in your time.
Survive.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. And I was like crunching numbers and I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm literally gonna have to live with 5 people, you know, never eat anything more than $3 and not have a social life. And then I was like, all right, okay, problem solved. I could bartend on weekends. So I was like, all right, I could work 5 days a week in New York City. I could bartend on weekends. I've got this. Maybe it'll only last 2 years. I'll just work 7 days a week. And like, that's normal. It's not normal. And so I brought that back to the job offers. I was like, all right, you know, I could accept this, but I have to bartend on weekends in order for me to like survive in New York. And they're like, well, you can't do that because we might have events on weekends that you're gonna have to be at. And I was like, okay, bye. Like I just realized I couldn't, like that wasn't going to work for me. And I realized I was worth more than that. And I respect the people that are able to do that, but for me, it just wasn't what I was looking for.
You think you were broken? I mean, do you think something broke in you when you had that experience in South America, or you were studying abroad in Florence, that you were like, I've kind of tasted the other side now. It's not like I'm going to come back and just settle, you know?
Well, exactly. I realized how much of the world there still was to see, and I realized how many experiences there were, and I also realized that you didn't need a lot of money to do so if you were willing to, you know, stay in hostels or camp or cook your own food or take the overnight buses and things like that. And those are all things I did in the beginning. I don't do them as much now, but I transitioned into luxury travel about 5 years ago. But in the beginning, that is what I did. And you have to be willing to give those sacrifices. But that was a sacrifice I was willing to make. I didn't want to sacrifice to live in New York City to work somebody else's dream. I wanted to sacrifice for my own.
What a great, I mean, you need a t-shirt that says that, you know, if you're going to work for somebody's dream, it might as well be yours, you know, that's exactly right. Yeah.
And I worked longer hours than my friends that worked a desk job, and still to this day, I likely do. But again, at the end of the day, I know that it's for something that I want. It's for something that I believe in to my core, something that could benefit not only me, but those around me and the communities that I see too. And I think that that's really important. And to me, when I weighed being a PR hotshot in New York and having, you know, full control over my schedule, my freedom, you know, that kind of definitely outweighed. And then that said, it was just a far more lucrative path as well at the end of the day. Not in the beginning, of course, you know, as with anything, you start from square one, you build it up. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes a bit of investment. You never know if you're going to sink or swim, but you just hope you're going to swim. And that's sort of it, you know? So it's a scarier route, but in the end, it's just so much more fulfilling.
And when were you in your life ever going to have a better opportunity to take that kind of risk?
Exactly. You know? I mean, I wasn't married. I wasn't in a long-term relationship. I didn't have children. it was
Not a lot of
the
debt.
perfect time. Not a lot of debt.
Right.
Yeah, I had bartended 8 months prior to leaving for my first big trip, and so I had all that money saved up. I'm very good with money. I save very well, and so I had that bit of a cushion there. Again, not that you need a lot to start, but it's important to have something. You
Oh,
don't want to be,
absolutely.
you
And
don't want to start a
if it doesn't
business in
work
debt.
out, I mean, you can go back
Ex-
and you can step right back into that
Exactly. I
original
always knew I
path. Yeah.
had like a fallback plan. And
Right.
was that what I wanted to do full time? Absolutely not. But was it good money and something that I knew I could do anywhere if I needed to? Absolutely. And having that comfort, I can't even express
Right.
how
Right.
important that is, because I knew that I had something if I failed. I didn't think I was going to fail. I think it's important to have confidence. However, you also can't just ignore the fact that not everything happens the way that you want it to in
Well,
life
you've
or
gotta
in
understand that and
business.
flex that. I mean, you have to
Exactly.
going in, hey, the life of kind of an entrepreneur, is a little bit of a roller coaster, and you're
Exactly.
just going to have to accept that. But I love the idea. So you kind of started off, you went to Africa, you're camping, you're kind of experiencing this like nomadic lifestyle, but did you have a plan, and or when did the plan kick in? And you said, "Hey, this is how I'm going to
That's
make
a
a living."
great question. So when I turned down all the PR jobs, like I said, I decided to bartend. I was like, all right, this gives me a little bit of time to sort of figure it out, because my blog did really well in South America and I loved that. And I love documenting my experiences. But what was the bridge between, all right, here's this thing I'm doing for fun. Here's this level I'm supposed to be at for work. Here's sort of the other side of the world that I kind of want to be exploring. Like,
Yep.
how does it tie together?
Right.
And that was really difficult. And so when I was in Africa, so the first place I went, actually, let me rewind a second. So I bartended for 8 months in New York City, saved up all the money, then I was supposed to go teach English in the Galapagos Islands. And
Yep.
that's what I had planned on all year. I secured it early in the year. I was like, great, I will teach around the world. I love teaching. I got all the certifications I needed. And I was like, I'll teach in the Galapagos Islands, and then I'll go teach in Thailand, and then I could teach in Malaysia, and et cetera, et cetera. The possibilities are endless. And then 3 weeks before I was supposed to go teach in the Galapagos, that fell through. And I was like,
Now what?
come on, my lease is ending. I gave my notice at work. I was over bartending at that point because I'd been like counting down days till my trip.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, what am I going to do? And I remember like pulling open a map and just like looking at a map. And I was like, I'm going to go to Africa. And I still to this day have no idea what possessed
Africa,
me.
Connecticut, Africa.
Yeah, it just seemed right. And I went for 2 months and I camped through South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Lesotho. I went with virtual strangers, people that I'd met once for coffee that were up for a crazy adventure with me, apparently. They were amazing. They're still some of my closest friends today. And it's been super cool to actually follow their journeys as well.
Yeah.
But, we just went for it. And we were camping. We were cooking our own meals. We weren't spending a lot of money. And I remember literally sitting in a tent in Namibia, discovering Instagram and what hashtags were and why hashtags were important. And I remember I took this like beautiful photo of a sunset in Namibia, which still to this day was one of the prettiest things I've ever seen in my life. And I remember like the Columbia brand, an outdoor brand, reposted that photo. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool. They're like a really well-known brand. I'm wearing their pants right now. And I was like, maybe there's something to this Instagram thing. And so I just like casually posted on social media throughout Africa. I didn't have a lot of followers, nothing like that. It was largely friends and family. But it was on the Africa trip that I brought my first professional camera with me. And actually, if you fast forward, I now do professional photography. I've worked with GoPro. I've worked with Olympus cameras. I've worked at DJI, which is all pretty cool that those are all, clients now. But back then, I was just playing out my first DSLR, hoping and praying that my photos came out well. And ironically, a lot of my favorite photos that today are still from that very first trip to Africa.
Yeah.
Except while I was in Africa, to like give you more of a path, more like the work path here, I still didn't really know what I was doing. I was writing about my experiences. My first ever partnerships were in Africa. I partnered with the world's highest bungee bridge. I partnered with a safari company. I partnered with like a winery. So I started partnerships for the very first time on my very first trip, which is pretty incredible. And I'm definitely blessed to have gotten in on that like well before the word influencer existed. Um, but I still didn't know, okay, how do I take this passion and monetize it? When is it the right time to say, okay, I'm going to do this for you, but I'm charging this amount because it's work. And that took me a while to figure out. So it's the path sort of went from like passion to barter. So I was in that
Yeah.
barter phase for a while, where what I did, I learned in that trip to Africa that people were interested in me and my skill set and my website, but I couldn't figure out much more than that. So people were willing to give me experiences in exchange for write-ups, which was pretty epic.
Sure.
I had some of my greatest experiences in the world were done that way. And so the following year, so I got back from Africa. I was like, all right, I'm not stopping. Like, I can't. That was way too much of a success. I've got to figure this out. I still have no idea what I'm doing, but I've got to figure this out. And so I was like, all right, like, I'm just going to take off to Central America. And then I was in Central America. And I'm like, I'm just going to take off to Europe for a few months. And Central America, I paid for completely out of pocket. I camped through it for 2 months. It didn't cost a lot of money. I got to experience some amazing cultures, incredible food, wonderful people. It was so lovely. And then in Europe, Europe's more expensive.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, I've now been doing this about 6 months or so at that point, outside of study abroad. This is post New York. Right. I've been trying to do this in a professional capacity for about six months or so. Like, where's your confidence? Like, why don't you go pitch yourself? You could do this. And so preparing for Europe, I started pitching hotels. And well, first I started with a hostel. I got the hostel. I went from hostels to 5-star hotels in a matter of a week and a half. And next thing you know, my 6-month trip to Europe was completely covered by companies. So that allowed me to really hone in on my skill set. It allowed me to figure out how I liked to review hotels and tour companies and car companies and restaurants and all this stuff. And I realized all of a sudden that's sort of where like that light bulb went off, where it was like, oh my gosh, like people are enjoying working with me and enjoying what I'm offering. And
tell
again,
us how that happens. So
yeah,
I'm breaking here, but so
no, you're fine.
So there is, you see just an abundance of kind of micro influencers all over, that are, that I want to do this for a living, but they've got 12 followers, that type of thing. So it looks like to me, you have to have the perfect storm of, you have to have a following, you have to have quality work, you have to have the right pitch, the right approach to the, and give them something of value that they're really looking for. Because right now, I mean, I would think that hotels and resorts are just inundated with people that are trying to do what you did, 8 years ago or 6 years ago.
Yeah, and that's why I tried to put that. That's why I wanted to put like a timeline on this, because obviously there was way less competition years ago, but it also was, but it was people of quality going to these hotels, people that knew what they were doing, versus today, unfortunately, people see, these influencers, or I'll rephrase, people see the successful influencers and think, oh, I could do that. Sure. Even if you don't know how to take and edit a photo, even if you don't have a good website, even if you don't have an engaged audience. And the reality is, can somebody build that? Absolutely. But they need to put in the time and the effort to build that, to make them credible and of value to your client. Because if you're not valuable to your client, you shouldn't be pitching yourself. You should never pitch something just because you want it free. Ever.
Right.
You should be pitching it because you believe that you have something to offer to that client. That said, I mean, of course, is it nice to get a free 5-star hotel? Absolutely. But you have to be able to be of value to them. You have to, in your pitch, you have to show that you know the brand and you have tips as to how they can improve. And so, yes, it's very different. And it's been this very interesting journey to watch online, to see how people interpret, what's acceptable and what's not, because there's a very fine line. And yeah, hotels get hundreds of pitches a day. So it's like, you do need to know what you're doing. You do need to have value and credibility, and you need to be an expert at what you do. Because it's a lot more work than what people see on Instagram.
I mean, you had to have grown your following though in a pretty short period of time. Because if
Yeah.
I'm a 5-star resort in Europe and you got 15 followers and you say, "Hey, I just want to come and stay free and take pictures and I'll
Yeah.
share them with my social channels," they're going, "You got 15 people and 10 of them
Of
have your
course.
last name."
Of
You
course.
know?
I think at that point I was probably, for my very first partnerships, I was probably around 5,000 followers or so,
Hmm.
which I know sounds very small, but back then, like, that was pretty darn good.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
grew it from there. But then, you know, then you go through this phase where it's like, okay, you're in barter, you're doing really well with those clients. When do you get the guts to actually ask for money? Because all of a sudden, I was working more hours than all of my friends at a desk job, without a doubt. Like, even though, yes, I was in stunning locations, having some of the greatest accommodations and meals and experiences at these places, it was still work. All of a sudden,
Hmm.
it's not just fun and games. It's, oh, I need this photo for this reason and this meal for this reason. Oh, I'm not going to be able to go to bed at 10 p.m. because I have to write this article and I've got to wake up at 4 a.m. for this sunrise and make sure that I get here by this time to do that.
Yeah.
Like, and then that's just,
Yeah.
on the front side of things. That's not even the back end of SEO and organizing
Promotion.
and
Yeah,
writing
exactly.
and editing and all of that stuff.
Right.
And so all of a sudden I realized I was working, 16 plus hours a day for these companies for free things. And while it was great, you have to know your worth as well. I was reminded of, all right, I said no to the PR agencies because they didn't want to pay me they didn't want to pay me a livable wage.
Yep.
What I'm doing now is way more work than that. And I'm definitely not making that at that point.
Right.
So
But your
then I
expenses were
realized
lower too, though.
my expenses were low, much lower. And that's how I was able to do it. It
Yeah.
was on saved money from bartending, and that's how I was able to do the barter.
Right.
But then I got to the point where I was like, all right, I'd gotten home from another 8-month trip. It was like, all right, I either have to figure out how to make money with my brand that I've created, or I have to go get that job because I'm an adult and I need to support myself. And maybe this dream can't be a reality. And that was really
Mhm.
hard for me to come to terms with, because at that point I'd been traveling for 2-ish years,
Yeah.
more or less, two and
Right.
a half. And I wasn't earning a good enough income to live on, and I wasn't really sure what to do. I was having some of the greatest life experiences I could have ever had, and I was
Sure.
learning so much. I learned more in those 2.5 years than I did in any of my schooling.
Yeah. Yeah.
But still, that doesn't matter if sadly at the end of the day you do need money to survive.
Right.
And then thankfully one day it all sort of clicked. I was introduced to affiliate marketing, which taught me how to promote myself online, which just showed me how to better market myself, which is important. And then from there, that gave me the confidence to be able to reach out to the big clients that I wanted. So that way, when I was being hosted at these hotels or these tours or these, given cars for road trips and things like that, all of a sudden I would get paid for that. And so then I started working heavily with tourism boards and
Mhm.
big name
Yep.
hotels, and like I said, brands like GoPro and
Right.
Olympus and things like that. And all of a sudden, it did allow me to support myself. And it was this crazy thing where it's like, when your dream becomes reality, you're just like, and I like had this moment where I just like froze. I was like, is this real life? Like, I remember getting my first gig with a tourism board that was paid, and I couldn't believe it. I got to come up with the entire itinerary, do everything that I loved, and then get paid to cover doing what I loved.
What was the
And that
affiliate
was amazing.
relationships you have? Were they primarily with products, or was it with courses, or what?
So
How
it was a
was
bit
that?
of both. So it was a bit of both from the beginning. While I was like trying to find my way, I did some courses that I found valuable.
Mhm.
Anything that I promote from an affiliate standpoint, I have done in full myself.
Right.
I've
Right.
taken the courses, I've used the products.
Yeah.
I will never ever promote something that I have not done or used
Mhm.
personally, and that's a big issue in the social media world, is you'll
Yeah.
see people promoting things all the time, but the chance of people actually using them firsthand or taking the courses firsthand is pretty slim,
Right.
which terrifies me, quite frankly, and it makes me actually quite angry,
Kind of
because
lose credibility. Yeah.
you should never, ever promote anything to your audience that's loyal to you if you can't stand behind it.
Yeah.
So I took a few digital marketing courses that helped me immensely. I promoted a few products that I used all the time, like through my travels. And that was that. And I built that up. And then when that started earning passive income, then I started going after clients like tourism boards or brands, things
Mm-hmm.
like that. And then I realized that that was sustainable. That said, it's still a ton of work. I still probably work more than the average person that sits at a desk, but it's worth it all. And now I'm officially, consulting big companies. One of the companies I'm consulting just partnered with some massive credit cards. Other ones have worked with celebrities. So it's pretty wild to see this, to see myself, to think of myself as this person that just sort of wanted to see the world, now being able to use that skill set that I acquired to actually be able to be of value to huge brands.
Yeah.
It's something
Yeah.
I never expected.
That's amazing. I mean, as I think about just kind of the journey that you've been on, I mean, it's like there was a tipping point at one point that you can look back and say, that's kind of where I got on over the top of the mountain, and I'm kind of on a downhill slide right now a little bit in a good way, like
Yeah.
skiing type
I was
thing.
going
But
to say, I mean, that said, again, it doesn't come without its issues. Working for yourself is definitely not easy. You have to think of your own health insurance.
yeah,
You have to
yeah,
figure out that work-life
accounting, everything,
balance.
tax,
You need
everything. Yeah, right.
everything. So it's,
Yeah.
there's a lot involved. And a lot of the time well, there are definitely days where I'm envious of people who have a stable,
A little more
steady
stable. Yeah.
job, but I wouldn't trade what I've done ever. Like it worked out, and I'm really, really grateful for that because, like I said, the whole time, there's always kind of that little part of you that's like, I might fail. This might not work, but it's worth that risk.
Yeah.
It's worth it
Yeah.
because I would have never been where I am today if I didn't take that risk.
And I mean, is it so if you ever got to the point that you're not paying for, this lifestyle or whatever, is it really failure though? I mean, is it not just so fine, I just paid for an experience. I mean, you literally, I
Definitely
just
not.
am so much, more well-rounded, so much more cultured, so much more
Oh yeah.
experienced, than
Oh,
I was
absolutely.
before. So just your
Yeah.
life will never be the same. But I
Never.
I do want to drill down on a couple of things. I could continue to ask you questions all day long, but
No, you're good.
you're going to
Please.
say I got a thing at 8 o'clock tonight, But I'm really curious about the whole I guess the onset of COVID and how that has just hammered the travel agency, the travel industry, and how that, on a micro level, how did that impact you, and how do you see it you coming out of it,
Yeah.
sometime, in 2020, early 2021, or, whenever. So kind
Great
of walk us through that.
question. So I was actually in the Arctic when the pandemic um, emerged.
Hit.
When it was declared a pandemic, I was
Yeah.
well above the Arctic Circle in northern Norway. And I was supposed to be working with a tourism board over there. My photographer and we were in northern Sweden above the Arctic Circle, just had this like epic experience with the tourism board there. And then we crossed into Norway, and we knew, this is early March, and we knew that there was some sort of virus, but at that point, we just sort of thought it was a flu,
Yeah.
or a bad flu. We didn't think much of it. I wore a proper, N95 mask on the airplane just to be careful. And I wiped down my tray and seat
Yep.
and air conditioning vent. You always have to remember that one on an airplane. And I did all that on the way over, not because it was required by any means, but I'm by nature a germaphobe, and I've actually always traveled with a mask because I've been all throughout Asia, and it's just so much more commonplace. So I figured, you know what, I'll take some extra precautions. There's this thing going around, no big deal. We had this amazing 3 or 4 days in northern Sweden, crossed into Norway, and then all of a sudden the world changed. We had one day where it was like, oh, it's seeming like it's getting a little bad here. And then the next day we were told that we had to quarantine to a cabin for the next 14 days. We were stuck in Norway. Our whole itinerary was canceled or postponed, and we had to figure out how to get home. And we were like, This is interesting. You know, my friend had a family, his family's in Madrid, he has children. My family was home in Connecticut, obviously a bit far from Norway.
Yeah.
Between the two of us, we had 9 canceled flights trying to get home. 6 of them were mine. Every 20 minutes, news was changing on us. So while we were quarantined to the stunning cabin, that would be a dream most of the time. I mean, and we're so grateful that we were there of all places. It was really stressful because all we were trying to do is figure out how to get home.
Yep.
You know, the embassy couldn't help us. Nobody knew anything because it was so new. So ultimately, fast forward, we both get home through roundabout routes. I had to go directly into isolation because one of my family members is super high risk, so I didn't want to risk exposing him because I had to take 3 different freaking airplanes to get home. And you know, while I had a mask, thankfully, and Clorox wipes and stuff, nobody else did. So I was like, I did my absolute best, but who knows? I could have picked up anything.
Sure.
So I then had to rent an Airbnb and I completely isolate for 2 weeks. And I took it so seriously that like I went with 2 weeks worth of groceries and I didn't leave. I saw no one, nothing. I was an hour and a half away from my house in the woods, and that was that. While I was there, my dad got COVID, which was really scary. And he was also isolating himself because he still had to go into work. So he didn't want to expose my brother, who's high risk.
Right.
So he was isolating an Airbnb. I was isolating an Airbnb. He got COVID. He was really only the second person I knew that had it personally. So that was very scary when it's your dad, you know, coming down with it, where you're still reading online like, oh, this isn't real. And I'm like, my dad has it right now. We're taking turns calling him every hour to make sure he's okay. Like it was very, very scary.
Yeah.
Thankfully he's all right. He made a full recovery, but for those 2 weeks, I mean, that was terrifying.
Sure.
So I went from being stuck in the Arctic to isolating to my dad having COVID to ultimately I finally get home, and I was just like finally, because at that point it had been over a month. Well, at that point it had been over a month of just trying to get home.
Yeah.
And be safe. And then that's kind of where it dawned on me that like my business might disappear. You know, travel wasn't happening. Yeah. Well, actually it was probably like about a month later, because like people were still pretty hopeful for the first month that it'd disappear soon. And then about a month in, I was like, I've spent the last 7 years building my brand around travel. And travel doesn't currently exist right now.
Exactly.
And I saw, you know, my friends in the travel industry all losing their jobs, and I saw, you know, planes being grounded and air crew, you know, being let off and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh my, and borders closing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is for real.
Yep.
And there was that little part of me that at first, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't relieved in a lot of ways at the very beginning, because I'd been telling myself I wanted to slow down and do some things on my to-do list for years.
Yeah.
But I'd always had one incredible opportunity after another pop up that I couldn't pass up. And so the whole like settling down thing just kept getting pushed off and pushed off. But I'd been craving it for about 3 years actually. And so when the pandemic first hit, it was almost this blessing in disguise, weirdly enough, for me, because it forced me to stay home, redo my home office, which is not this, you know, check those things off my to-do list that I've been there for 3 years, organize some stuff, spend more time with my family. They were my bubble, you know, and things like that. But then as it continued month by month, I was realizing like, oh, wow, like I actually need to pivot my business slightly, because travel doesn't look like it's going to come back this summer like people were thinking, or this winter like people were thinking. And people were still pretty positive, but I've been around enough to read the cues well enough to know that it wasn't coming back this year. And I remember people laughing at me in May when I was like, yeah, Christmas travel, not a thing. Like people were like, there's no way. And I'm like, there is. And like, I'm telling you right now, I'm grounded for the year. And a lot of people didn't believe me. A lot of industry experts, or so-called industry experts, are saying travel would be back by the holidays. And then obviously look at where we're at. You know, the world is starting to close up again over in Europe because of increased cases. Things are increasing here in the States. It's I know Australia just closed one of their borders that were supposed to be reopened. Like it's obviously very, very serious. And so for me, at the very beginning of the summer, I was like, all right, plan B, part of being an entrepreneur is figuring out how to pivot, how to, go with the times and utilize your skill set the best that you can. And so I realized that I've always been consulting in some way, in some capacity, whether it was for a client's social media, or for marketing materials for hotels or things like that. I'd worked on email campaigns. I'd obviously been doing photography. I'd been, like I said, giving advice on social media strategy. And I was like, all right, I've actually selling consulting services for years now, just specifically to tourism boards, to travel people. I was like, what if I expand that a bit and go into the tech industry or the startup industry? And so what I did was I just did a pivot there, and I took everything I've learned over the last 7 years in business, and thankfully I realized that those skill sets transfer to any other industry if you're willing, again, to put in the work. And I was very willing to put in the work. And so thankfully I was able to leverage that and get into this tech and startup industry as a consultant. And so I'm now doing, business and marketing strategy, content campaigns, email marketing campaigns, lots of marketing strategy with clients, creative services like photography and videography, commercial shoots, things like that, which are all still applicable. Businesses are still running. And while the travel industry isn't right now, businesses are, and we need to support them in the best way that we can. And so I realized that I actually have that skill set to be able to help get their voices heard and get them seen online. And so I have been going that route. So I'm very, very, very grateful that I had the ability to take what I have learned and what I know and apply it to a different industry. I'm very grateful for that.
I'd ask you about that, about the consulting website, that you have, and you said that it is not live at this moment.
Launching next week.
I was going to say this may be a little bit before it goes live. So do you have kind of a date in mind that is it early November?
So I'm hoping a week from Monday, if everything works out. I'm not,
okay, so
I still,
the 8th or something, or 7th, 9th?
Wait, so hold on. So if Monday is the 1st, somewhere around the 8th, 9th, 10th, something like that.
Yeah,
sometime that week, I'm hoping.
Start of the second week in November. There you go. Post-election.
Exactly. Post-election, when hopefully things are calming down in this country.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's really just expanding on the consulting that I'm already doing, but I just wanted to have a clean website for it, something that very clearly shows, what I'm doing, what I'm training, what I'm coaching. I even realized that right now, since there's such a work from home environment, a lot of people don't even know how to position themselves in front of a camera or use the technology or screen share or have a clean background and eliminate distractions, wear clothes that don't, blend into your background. And so one of the big things I'm actually doing right now is visual and technical Zoom coaching or video conferencing coaching. So it's preparing people to have those meetings and those interviews and those presentations online instead of in person, since I've been working online now for 7 years.
You made me look at my camera right then as I'm going, did I blend in? Did I blend in the background? What am I wearing exactly right now?
But it's things that people don't think of that are so important. And because I have been in front of the camera for years and I have been working remotely for years, they're things that are second nature to me.
Yeah.
And sometimes the things that are second nature to us are things that other people really need help with.
Yeah.
And so actually it was a client of mine that suggested, after one day he was on a live training and I was like, hey, can you position your camera down a little bit and turn a little bit this way and change this? He was like, you should actually offer that. And I was like, I like that. And it's been amazing. It's been really cool because
you've had a few of those moments in your life.
I've had a lot of moments in my life, but it's really cool that, this is a time, I think, with the pandemic and with that sort of downturn and everything that we're used to, I think it's the best time to sort of hone into your skills and your passions and figure out what is it that you love? What is it that you want to do? What are your five-year goals? And if you could do anything today, what would it be? Things like now is the time to start thinking about those things because we have more time on our hands than ever before. And so there's no time like the present. And yes, again, always it takes work and it takes dedication and discipline without a doubt, but the results and the outcome is just so very worth it.
Let me ask you. So this was not on the questions that we had talked about or whatever, but you just made me wonder what your answer would be. So let's just hypothetically say you were starting today from scratch. Speak to our listeners that may be going, man, she's encouraged me so much to kind of break out of the cubicle farm that I live in, or whatever, and really do something on my own, work from home, kind of digital nomad, some mixture there or whatever.
Mhm.
What would you do tomorrow to restart again? Maybe without the luxury of saying, all the things I already know, but like if
Of
you were
course.
starting out from scratch, what industry would you go into? What would you kind of aim toward?
So the number one thing, it all comes down to networking. It comes down to who you know and the effort that you're willing to put in to get to know those people. Personally, I would still go the travel route because that's my passion, but that might
Mm-hmm.
not be your passion. Ultimately, you need to figure out first and foremost, what's your passion? Who's your niche? And what is your differentiator? Those are three big questions that you need to ask yourself because it is um, a very competitive field, I guess, for lack of a better word. Then you need to think about, all right, if I could name my ideal clients, who are they? And make them realistic. Do the research. What are the brands you use that you love? Who is that dream client? For example, one that I have on my list is Bose. I've used Bose over the ear headphones
Right.
for probably like 16 plus years because
Mm-hmm.
they got me through my fear of flying and
Yep.
everything. And I still use them all the time. And ironically, I'm going to be working with Bose in the next month, finally, but it's about making that list of brands that you know and love, your dream list, and making the connections necessary to be able to find the right contact to work with them or to even just talk to them, to befriend them. You never just want to cold pitch somebody. You want to get to know them, know who
Mm-hmm.
they are as people, because at the end of the day, we're all human. We all enjoy a good laugh and a good smile and a good conversation. And so as long as you have value to bring, nobody will turn that down. But that comes back to my original point is, what is your value and
Yep.
what makes you a differentiator?
Yeah.
Because if you don't have value, then you can't network that way. And so, you have to come up with your elevator pitch, figure out what it is that you love and what you can offer, and then go after those dream clients. And it's not easy. That, and then of course, you got to be active on social media, unfortunately. It's a lot of work. It's a
Yep.
lot of work, but you definitely do need some presence this day and age.
Right.
A decade ago, you didn't,
Yep.
but now you need some form of a presence because it is unfortunately a way for people to see if you're, alive and well, for lack of a better word.
That's your
To
new
see
resume.
that
That's
you're
your new
there.
CV.
It
Is
is.
the social presence. And
It
so, how do you
is.
get to
Yeah.
these brands? How do you, especially when you're just starting out? How do you approach, these name brands? I mean, you're not going to pick up the phone and say, "Can I talk to the vice president of marketing, please?" So
Well, that is kind of a secret, Kevin. We all have our ways.
we have a
But
$3.99 program to get you.
I was
That's
gonna say,
right.
I mean, those are things that we teach. But I mean, it's do your research. And the easiest way for me to say it is do your research. We all have access to Google today. Those contacts
Yep.
that you want, they're
Yep.
there.
Yep.
You just got to do some digging.
Yep.
And again, it takes time. You're not gonna find the contact you want or the new friend you want right off the bat. But if you're determined to make it work, you will. You'll find them online. Every single contact that I've personally gone after, I have found online. I've made them the connections easily through Google.
Yep. Yep.
Whether you then end up hitting up somebody's DMs or you find a contact on a website, there's a variety of ways
Right.
that you can
Where
connect
there's
to
a
people
will, there's a
today.
way.
There is. I mean, I have found certain contacts that, on first search, it doesn't look like I'll find them. Second search doesn't look like I'll find them. Fourth search doesn't look like I'll find them. On the eighth search, I finally find the person that I need.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily always easy. And then, of course, you have to be able to pitch yourself, which is a whole other, area of expertise that's necessary.
Right.
But you just take it step by step.
Sarah, this has been a true delight to chat with you today, and
Thank
like I
you.
said, we could continue to have this conversation on and on. Just turn the recorder off and just keep chatting. But I know you've got other things to
Definitely.
do headed into the weekend. But it has been a joy and a blessing to have you with us, and you just
Likewise.
kind of
Thank
lit up
you.
our screen with enthusiasm and laughter, and really added to the ambiance of Rising Tide here. So is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you just kind of want to close with, and just maybe tell people where the best place to find you online?
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. So best place to find me online, I'm the 5 Foot Traveler. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, LinkedIn, literally everywhere. I also, of course, have a website, the5foottraveler.com. I love meeting new people, love saying hi. So definitely send me a message, say hello. We'll have a good little chat. And thanks for tuning in.
Sarah, thank you again. It's been great to have you on, and I just to kind of watch your journey, for the last few months, just on the socials, and just to see even how you've pivoted, recently. And so it'll be interesting to see what this new consulting gig is going to offer. And we're going to have you on to have a kind of a follow up about your other business,
Let's
because
do it.
we'll
Let's
just
do
have to
it.
do that in 2021. But Sarah, thank you so much for just taking the time
Thank you so
today, and
much.
just playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Sarah, have a great day.
Absolutely. Thank you. You too, Kevin.
Thanks.
Another episode in the books. We hope you heard some great takeaways. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review on iTunes and YouTube. As always, thanks for listening to Rising Tide.